Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Today's topics: Prime's results for the Kentucky Derby and an update on the NBA playoffs, a potential overstep by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, and rumors of a Bet365 acquisition. Kicking it off with the latest from Inside Prime Sports, a two-parter once again this week. Part 1, the Kentucky Derby. Adam, we'll start with you. How was it for you as both a bettor and a bookmaker?
So first of all, Prime can't take anything horse racing. New Jersey, Ohio, we did any horse racing. But obviously we have Bet Chris in LATAM as a client for Planetech, and results were great. My results were crappy. Got the winner completely wrong. I was dead against the horse that won the race. But looking back on it, that was at like 5.5, 6 to 1. It ended up going off closer to 9s, but still, I was against the horse, hence Burnham Square that had run in a similar prep race. I thought it was a better horse, and he ran into some trouble mid-race, so was never a chance at that point. But, it was a nice wet derby, and results, the dead exactor I had was Journalism Beza, which ran second and third. So if that Sovereignty had just tripped over or something coming down, I would have cleaned up. It would have ran a huge result. Unfortunately, I got this wrong. However, I'd backed the previous two winners when I was at the track. I was not at the track this year. So guaranteed next year, first Saturday in May, I will be at Churchill Downs, come hook or by crook, because it seems like the only place I can actually back the winner when I'm located. Yes, that's my theory in gambling.
All right. Well, Joe, it seems like the Kentucky Derby may be one of the ultimate events to attend from a fan's perspective. And to that end, I assume you weren't there in person this year, but tuning in from a fan's perspective, how'd it go for you?
Well, that was definitely a mind-numbing 6+ hours of sitting there. I mean, they really got to they got to pack the undercard a little better, right? I mean, the coverage is terrible. They pull in a bunch of people who they don't really do racing most of the time. And then the people who do racing, they give them very little time. They seem more focused on hats and backstories and things like that. If you really wanted the backstory on racing, you should join my wife and apparently now Adam and, totally geek out on the Race to the Crown series that's on Netflix. My wife spent at least 2 hours pointing out people like, okay, well, this was their role last year. I'd give credit to NBC and to trying to turn it, it is one of the biggest days on the American sports calendar, and trying to give it the Super Bowl treatment. It's appropriate. They just haven't found the right mix yet. Obviously, the weather was probably a dampener on it, but, watching that 100,000+ people being unabashedly publicly drunk, wearing weird clothes, and having just the most pedestrian thoughts about it. I mean, I don't think they talked to anybody in an interview that didn't back, well, one of the top 3 horses. That was very uninteresting in that regard. But beyond that, on to the Preakness.
Yeah, and which I hope that the Kentucky Derby winner does not run in, because I do have there will not be a Triple Crown. So I hope the owners and whatnot decide not even to bother running in that race, and then I can just collect the wager, quite and simple.
Well, hopefully everybody up at Pimlico is listening, even if the Kentucky Derby winner makes it, maybe they could put something in his way, an injury or something like that, case of laminitis. I don't know.
Oh, no, we don't wish that on athletes. Come on, Joe.
Look, we're being glib here. I mean, but no, Preakness is right up the road from me in Baltimore. It's not far from where I went to school. It's just beautiful. So I'm hoping to make it out for that leg. And who knows, maybe my Australian life may be up this way as well.
And I will say there was one other winner that come out of both the Triple Crown Netflix show and the Kentucky Derby is Jason Worth. What I will say is he was on with Dornoch last year. They ran it. They won the Belmont. They actually had another horse in the Kentucky Derby this year. So he's just running hot straight out of it. But they have a stables called Icon Racing that they're actually looking for investors and people to join them. So I think I'm going to take a closer look and maybe try and head down that path to get more involved in horse racing in the US.
So what's the entry-level contribution there?
No, I don't know.
No, I'm asking for me, not for you.
Oh, listen, I think they're putting together something nice, and he seems like a great character to get involved in and has a passion. Obviously, athletes are looking for that buzz once they retire, and looks like he's found his. So
I think Worth is a great, in that series on Netflix, walks around calling his horse Big Puppy. I love it. But I think he's a great stand-in for the audience because he's brand new to racing. That's his first horse. That Darnot was the first horse he ever bought. And to have it go and win the Belmont was just amazing. Here's a guy who, obviously, I know him, mythical, was on the 2008 Phillies and everything, did really great in town. And to see him and his enthusiasm, and this is something that he's just come to, and he's so honest in that documentary about how, this is the only thing that he's felt like it could replace that excitement that he felt from being on a World Series championship team and everything. I think it's just amazing. I feel like we're talking more about Netflix. Maybe we should be getting some promotional dollars for them. But it's the one thing that you do hope is everybody talks about horse racing is in decline. Christ, my neighbors, they made it seem like I was committing a crime against humanity. I was watching it because they're so cruel to the animals and it. I get it, but it's such a beautiful, majestic sport. It is kind of sad that the public at large has kind of left it behind. It really would be nice to see it get a resurgence.
Well, pivoting from the race for the Triple Crown and a potential synergy between Joe's passion for the Phillies and Adam's passion for horse racing to the race for the Larry O'Brien Trophy and the NBA playoffs. Guys, round 2 is now underway with underdogs winning all 3 game 1s thus far. Adam, what can you share about results for the book coming out of round 1 and any updates on futures exposure?
So round 1 wasn't good. The NBA last week was horrible results, both Ohio and New Jersey. And that majority of our players in New Jersey are arbors, then we just had the wrong number of results, fell poorly. But NBA was not good in that first round of playoffs. Hockey was good, but NBA not. As for who was sweating, just no Warriors. Everything else is, all right, but Warriors are not a good result. So I hope that they do not win the next series. I was hoping Houston would get through that first one, but yeah, no Warriors. That's it.
All right, well, from what I've heard, Houston was done in by the jerseys they rolled out for Game 7, so maybe you can thank that for the result with Golden State advancing. But with that NBA playoffs update, we will go ahead and pivot from the hard court to another kind of court, if you will, our water cooler segment, exploring yesterday's news, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission indicating it will update an existing policy banning betting on players or teams who promote or represent Russia or Belarus. Under the new changes, the MGC will require sportsbooks to immediately pull a bet if a Russian or Belarusian fighter not previously known to, quote, promote or represent, unquote, their country, walks into an event draped in a flag or otherwise actively promotes their country. Joe, this seems to be an example of a state regulator implementing a rule to conform to American foreign policy, which arguably falls outside of its scope. Captain Jack Andrews has weighed in on Twitter, calling this the definition of overregulation. How much do you agree with Captain Jack in terms of seeing this as an example of overreach, or perhaps disagreeing, seeing it as something reasonably falling within the mandate of the MGC and other state regulators?
Well, philosophically, I'd have to say I'm opposed to this. The Olympics were originally founded so that warring city-states in Greece could put down their arms and compete without violence. Okay. When politics enters the arena of sports, this is where sports should be free of this. Okay. I don't think there's anything athletes can do in the field of competition that is going to alter what's going on in that war between Russia and the Ukraine. If you're somebody of my age, you remember the good old days, like when the Olympics were great. Because it was us versus them. It was like the Soviet bloc versus, the U.S. and the Western countries. That's when there was a lot of drama to this. Because, of course, the athletes were propaganda apparatuses. That's why, the Miracle on Ice. Why does anybody give a shit about? Hockey was not our sport. Why does anybody care? What, because we beat Finland in the final for the gold medal? No, it's because we beat the Soviets. With a bunch of college students who had no business being there. And the Red Army team was one of their biggest propaganda tools, and we beat them. So this notion now, where we don't want this to become a proxy for it, I just wonder, where have we really gone on this? It's like sports should be free of this. I knew people who didn't get a chance to compete in the 80 Olympics because we boycotted them. And then, the 84 Olympics, the fields weren't as good because they boycotted us in return. And the other thing is, like, when you read the reporting on this, it's amazing. So they have this simple rule. Okay, if a team, you can't offer wagers on like Russian teams, Belarusian teams, competitions in those countries. Great. And then every time they tried to like, well, what about this? Let's clarify it. They didn't clarify it. They made it worse. They made it harder. A great example is like, okay, well, when is an athlete representing Russia? Okay, like right now? Or, you use an example like you got the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. Alexander Ovechkin, who's been celebrated for the last year in the NHL because he's now the greatest goal scorer. Sorry, Wayne Gretzky and all you Canadians. Ovechkin's the greatest goal scorer. That guy has been a pillar of the Russian national team in the Olympics, the World Cup, the World Championships, everything. When the Capitals won the Stanley Cup in 2018, it was a World Cup year, and he was invited by Putin to go to the final, and he was standing, they showed him on TV, standing up there in the stands with the Stanley Cup over his head in Russia at the World Cup final. Okay. Is he a representative of Russia? Sergei Bobrovsky, who is the best goaltender in the NHL, probably the last 15 years, which is really great because the Flyers traded him away for Ilya Bryzgalov, who sucked ass. We had the best goaltender and we got rid of him. God, the Flyers. He's in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. That guy has been the backstop goaltender for every Russian team in any major event, from the Olympics to the World Cup, everything, for the last 10 years. So are we not taking any bets on the Capitals, who had the best regular season trophy, and the Panthers, who are the defending Stanley Cup champion? Because if they're not representatives of Russia, who are? If you look at the Dmitry Bivol fight against Artur Beterbiev, guy from Russia, fought for Russia, won over 260 amateur fights for Russia against a guy born in Russia, emigrated to Montreal. Sounds more Russia than Bivol, right? Do we not take bets on that fight because those guys had that record and are clear representatives of the Russian style? This is a problem. I know I'm being dramatic about it, but it's like, okay, why are we doing this? Okay, it's not going to do anything to alter what is happening. Okay, we're not violating any kind of international ban. What we are doing is we're allowing sports again to be used as a political proxy. And now we're pushing it back on bookmakers, where we all got to watch the television right now. And you're like, what happens if UFC fighter comes into the ring and he's got a Russian flag tattooed on his fucking shoulder? What do we do then? Do we cancel the bets? Is that promoting it? Right? This is why politics should not be in sports. And I really think, and I appreciate that this is handed down to the regulators, but this is one reason why we should just, as a blanket policy, keep it out, let the athletes compete against one another, and we'll save the politics and the fighting for something else. Because if we don't, then all we have is fighting, right? If we can't have sports, then all we do have is the fighting part. All right, TED Talk over.
Adam, building on Joe's point about a lot of this getting passed down to the bookmakers, while Prime isn't operating in Massachusetts, this obviously presents some trading challenges for operators that do, specifically in the case of MMA and combat sports, where it may not be known if a fighter is violating the rule until walking out, meaning books would have to void bets at the last minute. So how much of a challenge do you think this truly represents for trading floors? And what do you make of this rule in a broader sense?
Well, one, if you had to come to me first in this, I would have just passed it to Joe, but because I knew that was the kind of response we were going to get. Two, I was a big fan of Massachusetts gaming until this one. They've obviously just too much time on their hands. This is probably one of the most ridiculous and short-sighted and things that I've ever seen a regulator roll. Joe sort of laid it out in the hockey. So what happens? You lose your bets, and after the game, you start scouring the internet for something that a hockey player in a team of so many said pro-Russian or Belarus in a Russian or Belarus newspaper. Send it to Massachusetts Gaming and request that your bets are void. This is just one of those things that they need to stay out of and just concentrate on. Protect the consumers, get your taxes. That's it. That's the goal. That's your job.
All right, well, moving on from big news out of a state this week to big news potentially with nationwide ramifications. Our look ahead segment, rumors of Bet365 M&A. The Guardian has reported the family owners of Bet365 are weighing a sale of the business for more than £9 million, or about $12 billion. This comes from news that the company is fully withdrawn from operating in China, and a move that could be perceived as tidying the house ahead of a potential acquisition. Guys, lots of potential angles to this one. So 3 jump ball questions. Number 1, why do you think Bet365 is looking at this option at this point in time, especially when their numbers are still growing?
I mean, 12 billion, that's cheap. I mean, if DraftKings market cap 16, 17 or something like that, like that seems very cheap to me. It's just all the regulations, all the regulatory aspects, Massachusetts, why would you want to be in this business? It's making harder and harder. They've gotten their, they've built a massive business from, I think a car park installed to where they are now. If this is the time for them to get out and the money's there and someone's willing to pay that for it, go right ahead. Enjoy the rest of your days or, get into whatever else you want. But this is just becoming a lot harder of a business to get involved in, expansion into highly regulated ones. Then you've got to start looking at where else you are, etc. So it's probably a good time to get out. But yeah, 12 billion, it seems a cheap price compared to the market cap of some of these other companies.
Yeah, if you own an asset, any kind of asset, you own a house, you own land, you own business, you should be aware of what its present value is, right? And so the fact that they're doing this right now, all they're really doing is gauging, like, what's the value of our asset? Does this mean that they're intent on selling or something like that? Yeah, or not necessarily, but I think it's a good way for them to run a trial balloon up and find out, like, okay, well, what do people think we're worth?
And to your point, Joe, the second question I'll get to here is that in an M&A scenario, understanding this isn't committing to doing anything specific yet, who would you see as being the potential acquirers, and where do you think they would place most of the value in the Bet365 business?
I don't think any of the current U.S. leaders are really good candidates for it, because what would they be doing? They'd be buying something that would be duplicative of their business. And then, what are they buying? Like, Bet365 is massive globally, not so much in the United States. So if what you're doing is you're buying global reach, okay, but you're also buying a platform, you're buying technology, you're buying all those things. So what are you going to do? You're going to buy theirs and then shit can your entire department here, because that's an awful lot of redundancies. And that's how these mergers, they go so wrong. And I've lived through like one of the worst in corporate history with AOL and Time Warner. They go wrong when it's like merging cultures, platforms, systems. So they fit together really well in the PowerPoint deck and in the minds of the people who want to make the deal, not so much on the execution level. So I don't think it's a good candidate to merge with anybody that we have here right now. It's probably more likely that you're looking at private equity, since they got gobs of money and they're looking what they do with it. But even there, like right now, private equity deals are just not happening in general, or they've slowed down because rates are so high. They leverage up to make these deals happen. I don't think going IPO directly right now is probably a good candidate either, because leaving China is probably just one step that they would need to do. There's probably other things. And this is what private equity does, is they get in there, they acquire, they clean shit up, and then they prep it for going IPO. I think that would be a more likely path to market than going direct. But if I had to pick one today, right now, it would be actually status quo. I think maybe the Coates family looks at this and they say, kind of like to Adam's point, like, maybe it's just time to just kind of look at this as a family business. It's generational business. And maybe we focus more on succession planning than we do on getting the family out of there. But that would be my guess right now from all the options.
Truly playing the role of Switzerland for those who can see this on YouTube in the shirt Joe's rocking today.
Yeah.
Adam, from your perspective, any thoughts as to potential candidates to acquire Bet365 and where they would see the primary value in the business?
Well, again, looking at the market cap of DraftKings, maybe there's put those two things together and they take 50-50 each, and then put Bet365 into the driver's seat of DraftKings, and then they have the US and whatnot. But outside of that, I imagine, the BlackRocks, the Apollos of the world are sniffing around this space. But, for me, the upside of a merger or acquisition, depending on how it went, is, maybe the product and the brand and what takes a dent and opens up the door for some others to slot into their space, because they're a behemoth. They're a strong brand. They've done it so well for so long. Yes, I've had 30 plus accounts limited there. I cannot bet there for at least 10 years. However, for what they're doing and where the industry's gone, they've been way ahead of the game. They've built a massive global product, and they're just so far ahead of everybody else, in my opinion.
Just real quick, if you look at what somebody gets in the deal, whomever acquires it, whether it's BlackRock or somebody like that, Apollo, any of those guys, they're probably getting the one company that could chase down the two market leaders here in the U.S., given today's market conditions. They have the platform, they have the product, they have the cash, they have the wherewithal to be able to do that based on the way the market is today. The one, I think, thing that you have to think about here is how much uncertainty there is perceived to be right now in particularly the U.S. market. You look at the uncertainty that, for instance, everything that's swirling around the CFTC and sweeps, skyrocketing state taxes. And if imagine being somebody evaluating, a potential investor evaluating this deal right now, are you betting on a convention, the sports betting market continuing to be the kind of conventional state by state regulated product? Or do you look at the hype around CFTC, Kalshi, all that, and think that's the future? And so that's one thing that I think would be a drag potentially on this deal. It's like they have all the tools to win today's war, but do they have what it takes to win tomorrow's war?
And to that end, Joe, perfect transition. Third and final jump ball question for you guys. What do you think any M&A transaction could mean for Bet365's U.S. ambitions?
I mean, they get the right amount of money and product. They've already shown that if they put in a jogging effort, they can gain pretty decent market share quickly. I mean, they were almost embarrassed by how quickly their business grew in the Ohio launch. They were taken aback by that. They have a very good brand. They have a very good product. And that's without even taking Adam's action there. 30 accounts banned. There's some guys who get that done in a week. But if you think that you can power through and use it as your platform to gain traction, and the other thing is, it's not just the US, obviously. It's like globally, you'd consider Flutter, FanDuel's parent company, to be a good and worthy opponent in the global market, but domestically, like DraftKings is nothing. I could see the DraftKings guys starting to try and sharpen their pencils to see, like, well, how do we do business elsewhere and become more like Flutter, when DraftKings probably just focus on trying to handle their backyard. And I don't think they need to take on any more debt or anything like that. And it wouldn't be, I don't think there's a merger. If you've got a family that's looking at it and they're evaluating it to move the asset on, and I guess they're just going to do what? Move full-time into managing Stoke City, try and get them promoted. Why would you get into a merger of supposed equals? That's too busy a transaction. So,
and on that note, we will go ahead and tie a bow around this week's episode. To the audience, whatever may or may not happen with Bet365, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, and throughout the duration of the NBA playoffs, thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.